All right, man. Peace. Bronzebird here with another video. Before I begin, like and subscribe. Thank you. So it's really crazy how we get into these discussions about the pandemic, such from my last video you can view, in which we're starting to have a different process on how we analyze what's going on with the pandemic as we move forward, the reintroduction of society, all these new things that's coming into society as we move forward. You know, the Great Economic Forum, I believe. A lot of these organizations that want to push forward on a lot of these different things that wasn't worn before. So my thing is this: one thing that I've been actually staring at for a while and I wanted to make a video on was this idea about public amnesty, in which it seems as if the writer of this article is trying to get people to forgive those that was quote unquote misled or gave the wrong information about the pandemic, even if their ideas was outstretched, obtuse, and they believed that the idea of getting inoculated was a bad idea. I think that's pretty much what this author is alluding to in this essay that I'm going to read for you, in which I would say everybody's entitled to their opinion, right or wrong, but it's just really crazy how it's more of this campaign to make those that was on the opposite end or was in opposition to the Verena protocols made to feel like they're getting a pat on the head like they're a dog. Like, we forgive you because you didn't understand, it was misled, it was misinformation. And so I had seen other articles that attributed their opinions to what they thought about this article, in which they say there shouldn't be any pandemic amnesty. And then they say, these people were being completely irresponsible, reckless, and putting people in harm's way and all this other stuff. You already know you're going to find articles like that anyway, and especially from like the bigger organizations that have their opinion on it. But I'll share my thoughts at the end. I'll just show this article to you guys. Before I begin, make sure you like and subscribe. Thank you. So it's from the Atlantic, and this is by Emily Oster. Oyster. Oster. In April 2020, with nothing else to do, my family took an enormous number of hikes. We all wore cloth masks that I had made myself. We had a family hand signal, which the person in the front would use if someone was approaching on the trail and we needed to put on our masks. Once, when another child got too close to my thin 4-year-old on a bridge, son on a bridge, he yelled at her social distancing. These precautions were totally misguided. In April 2020, no one got the corona from passing someone else hiking. Outdoor transmission was vanishingly rare. Our cloth masks made out of old bandanas wouldn't have done anything anyway. But the thing is, we didn't know. Now, before I read on, I've seen a lot of people use different cloths in order to cover their face, even to the fact that you had certain people out here who was walking outside with like these like helmets. I mean, walking outside with these shields, like they straight out of a Star Wars movie, man. It was crazy when the pandemic began, but stuff like that. I have been reflecting on this lack of knowledge thanks to a class I'm co-teaching at Brown University on Corona. We spent several lectures reliving the first year of the pandemic, discussing the many important choices we had to make under conditions of tremendous uncertainty. Some of these choices turned out better than others. To take an example close to my own work, there is an emerging, if not universal, consensus that schools in the US were closed for too long. The health risks of in-school spread were relatively low, whereas the costs to students' well-being and educational progress were high. The latest figures on learning loss are alarming, but in spring and summer of 2020, we had only glimmers of information. Reasonable people, people who cared about children and teachers, advocated on both sides of the reopening debate. Another example, when the V's came out, we lacked definitive data on the relative efficacies of the Johnson and Johnson shot versus the mRNA options from Pfizer or Moderna. The mRNA, these have won out. But at the time, many people in public health were either neutral or expressed a J&J preference. This misstep was not nefarious. It was the result of uncertainty. Obviously, some people intended to mislead and made wildly irresponsible claims. Remember when the public health community had to spend a lot of time and resources urging Americans not to inject themselves with bleach? That was bad. Misinformation was and remains a big problem, a huge problem. But most errors were made by people who were working in earnest for the good of society. Given the amount of uncertainty, almost every position was taken on every topic, and on every topic, someone was eventually proved right and someone else was proved wrong. In some instances, the right people were right for the wrong reasons. In other instances, they had a prescient understanding of the available information. The people who got it right, for whatever reason, may want to gloat. Those who got it wrong, for whatever reason, may feel defensive and retrench into a position that doesn't accord with the facts. All of this gloating and defensiveness continues to gobble up a lot of social energy and to drive the cultural wars, especially on the internet. The discussions are heated, unpleasant, and ultimately unproductive. In the face of so much uncertainty, getting something right had a hefty element of luck, and similarly, getting something wrong was an immoral failing. Treating pandemic choices as a scorecard on which some people racked up more points than others is preventing us from moving forward. We have to put these fights aside and declare a pandemic amnesty. We can leave out the willful purveyors of actual misinformation while forgiving the hard calls that people had no choice but to make with imperfect knowledge. Los Angeles County closed its beaches in summer 2020. Ex post facto, this makes no more sense than my family's mass hiking trips. But we need to learn from our mistakes and then let them go. We need to forgive the attacks too, because I thought schools should reopen and argued that kids as a group were not at high risk. I was called a teacher killer and a genocidaire. It wasn't pleasant, but feelings were high, and I certainly don't need to dissect and rehash that time for the rest of my days. Moving on is so crucial now. It's crucial now because the pandemic created many problems that we still need to solve. Student test scores have shown historic declines, more so in math than in reading, and more so for students who were disadvantaged at the start. We need to collect data, experiment, and invest. Is high dosage tutoring more or less cost effective than extending school years? Why have some states recovered faster than others? We should focus on questions like these because answering them is how we will help our children recover. Many people have neglected their health care over the past several years, notably routine B rates for children, for measles, pertussis, etc., are way down. Rather than debating the role that messaging about Karina V's have in its decline, we need to put all our energy into bringing these rates back up. Pediatricians and public health officials will need to work together on community outreach, and politicians will need to consider school mandates. The standard saying is that those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. By, but dwelling on the mistakes of history can lead to a repetitive doom loop as well. Let's acknowledge that we made complicated choices in the face of deep uncertainty and then try to work together to build back and move forward. Well, the ironic part of this essay that was said by Miss Emily is trying to, I guess, play the middleman between those who felt like this was unreasonable and those who felt that it was reasonable. Reflecting on how it was with the pandemic in personal view, I've gotten to see both arguments happen where people felt as if they didn't want their child going back to school, and others that felt like they did want their child to go back to school because they felt as if learning at home wasn't effective. And by having classes being met on Zoom was more better than having a class and having a child in a classroom because they didn't have to be around each other. One thing I would say about this, beyond the public or the pandemic amnesty, was that we definitely see a decline in socialization where people started to be scared of each other off of something that you could actually get or something you could not get. Don't know. Many factors came into this, your immune system, how your diet was, if you had a disease, and who was it affecting the most. But what I will say this about public amnesty is this. At the end of the day, we do realize the lesson that whether you got inoculated or not did not spare you from catching it at all. What I mean is, you could catch it if you did get inoculated, and you could catch it if you didn't get inoculated. And it's just very funny the different debates that happened when it came to protocols about how people are going to re reintroduce themselves into society and how are we going to do it? Were we still going to do distancing, or are we going to be able to just say, hey, it happened, and so our kids could be together and we could be together and stuff like that? And I think it's so funny how they still have a lot of these protocols in place in certain cities and states where we're just sitting up there like, well, we're not the same as we used to be, so why don't we just turn this off now? These states is like no, and these cities is like no, and I'm just sitting here like this is unreasonable. But let me know what your thoughts is in the comment section. And before I leave, make sure you like and subscribe. Peace.